Hello everyone, I am a storyteller. Tonight, as you curl up in a warm blanket, letting your mind gradually drift between dreams and reality, let me tell you a story. Gentle, slow, but full of mysteries that make you shiver. If you find these stories touch your emotions, please give a like, share with everyone, and subscribe to the channel. That is the most precious gift that gives me more motivation to continue telling. Now, close your eyes, relax. The story has begun. It started normally, like many stories that begin in life, a small apartment, where you try to find peace, a new space to rebuild your life. The apartment I chose seemed like an ideal place, compact, comfortable, reasonable rent. But it's all just the surface. Things got weird from the moment I turned the key in the lock. The door opened and cold, damp air rushed in, as if it came from another world. The hallway was dark, the faint light of the only lamp flickering, trying to stand up in the darkness. A heavy, stuffy feeling filled the space, making my chest tighten. An indescribable feeling told me that something was not right. A small voice in my head seemed to warn me, "Stop. Turn around. Don't come in." But then I stopped, convincing myself that it was just the initial feeling, the anxiety of being in a strange place. This apartment was smaller than I expected, so cramped that I couldn't help but feel trapped. My single bedroom only has enough room for a bed and a narrow hallway, just enough to walk around a little. The window let in only the dim light of the street lamps, but what was outside was nothing but the faint silhouettes of nearby buildings. The walls, although newly painted, still have small cracks and hairlines like spider webs, signaling the age of the house. That feeling made me feel an indescribable insecurity. From the first night, I noticed something strange. It was a sound, at first just a small hum, but as the night went on, it became clearer, as if someone was very close. Every time I try to be quiet and close my eyes, the sound echoes in my ears, making it impossible for me to relax. I wonder if it's an old pipe, a loose vent, or just the noise of the city out there. But no matter what, the feeling of something lurking right under the paint, right under the wallpaper, couldn't be dispelled. Unable to resist my curiosity, I moved the bed closer to the corner of the wall where the noise was coming from. A simple action, but this change seems to open another door. The first night I lay nearby, a strange feeling welled up inside me. My fingers trembled as I pulled the blanket over me. My heart was pounding, as if I had just run a long distance. A feeling of fear pervades the space, as if an invisible presence is hovering somewhere. That night I woke up in a panic. My heart was pounding, my head was dizzy, and cold sweat drenched my back. Even though I tried looking around the room, there was nothing there. But the feeling that someone was near the foot of the bed, even sensing the slight change in the air, was something I couldn't shake. This incident continued to recur, and each night, the strange feeling only grew stronger. That invisible presence was like a ghost always watching, always following my every step. Sometimes, even while I'm cooking, I feel like there's someone standing right behind me, even though I'm sure no one is there. A sudden coldness ran down my spine, sometimes as if I was being stared at by an invisible gaze. Even when I shower, it feels like someone is standing right in the room, even though I know for sure there is no one. I tried to ask the manager about the strange things in this apartment, but he just shrugged, answered briefly and avoided. It seemed like he knew more than he was saying, but I didn't want to keep asking. I told myself that maybe I was imagining too much, or maybe I was just too stressed because I had just moved. But there's no denying that these strange feelings only increased, making it unbearable for me. In the end, I was forced to move the bed back to its original position, so I could sleep without the feeling of being watched, but even so, I still couldn't feel completely secure. Even though I moved the bed back to its original position, closer to the middle of the room, the strange feeling didn't go away. In fact, it may have become even more obvious when I began to hear clearer and clearer sounds coming from the corner of the wall near the window. A gentle sigh, like someone breathing in the dark, a cold and invisible breath. I couldn't identify its source, but it always startled me at night. Every time I tried to fall asleep, I felt something strange engulf the room, like a wave of heaviness invading my body. Even though I turned off the lights and threw myself into the darkness, I still felt the air in the room become thick and heavy, as if I was surrounded by something invisible. The shadows on the wall began to move, as if they were changing shape, forming strange shapes. My eyes began to blur, but I couldn't take my eyes off those transforming shadows. On nights like that, I feel like I can't breathe. I tried to listen, but my breathing mixed with that strange sound, as if someone was right next to me, so close that I could feel their breathing. Every time I turned back to look, everything was as quiet as before, but the feeling that there was an inexplicable presence in the room kept me from sleeping. There are times when I begin to feel unable to distinguish between reality and imagination. It's hard to explain why I feel like invisible eyes are watching me, like this room isn't where I belong. All the familiar noises in the house, such as the sound of the refrigerator and the sound of traffic on the street, suddenly become different. Every time these sounds rang out, they scared me, as if they were coming from a strange world where there was no real life. But the worst part was the times I woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heavy in my chest, and feeling like someone was standing right next to my bed, staring at me. My eyes opened wide in the darkness, trying to find some sign of life, but there was none. Those nights, I was left with only fear, the emptiness of the space around me, and the feeling that I was not alone. One night, as I tossed and turned in my sleep, a sudden movement in the corner of the room woke me up. I stared into the darkness, feeling like something was floating right in front of me. Suddenly, a dark shadow flashed past, blurry like an unclear shape, causing me to panic. In that moment, I couldn't think about anything other than standing up, turning on the light and looking around the room. But nothing. I can't understand what's going on. I wondered if I was being sucked into a spiral of anxiety and paranoia. Are all these strange feelings just due to stress from living alone in an unfamiliar space? But then I decided I couldn't continue living in this insecurity. I have to understand what's going on. I can't keep letting these feelings rule my life. So I decided to do what I'd always avoided. I faced that corner, where the strange sound started, where the darkness seemed like it could touch me. One evening, I decided to move the bed back to its original position, near the window. As I laid down the mattress, a strange feeling arose within me. It wasn't fear, but an urge, a compulsion to face something lurking behind that wall. I couldn't explain what I was feeling, but something forced me to do it. Curiosity, fear, and a strange urge. That evening, as I lay down and closed my eyes, I felt a change in the space around me. I feel like there's something unusual. A gentle sound as if someone was approaching. My heart was pounding, and then I heard it more clearly, a small sigh in the darkness. I turned to look, but there was only darkness. There's no one. This feeling continued to follow me, and this time, I knew that I could no longer simply ignore it. I must discover the truth, I must face it, whatever it is. I can't stop thinking about all the bizarre things that happened. Every step I take in this room makes me feel like I'm walking on a fragile surface that could collapse at any moment. Sleepless nights not only make me tired, but they also create a feeling as if I'm being pulled into a vortex that I can't escape from. Some shadow was watching me from every direction, an invisible force that I couldn't understand. That night, as I lay on the bed pulled closer to the window, the air in the room became thick and heavy. The street lights outside the window were still dimly lit, but I felt like they weren't strong enough to dispel the darkness inside this room. It's difficult to clearly describe that feeling. I felt like I was buried in darkness, as if this room had become a tunnel with no way out. A feeling of fear began to cover all my thoughts. Every night, I thought I was getting used to this room, but in reality, its presence, which couldn't be seen but could be felt, became more and more obvious. The humming noises from the corner of the wall became stronger, as if something was trying to find a way to emerge from underneath the old paint, from the small cracks that I had overlooked. It wasn't just the sound of a harmless object, but a heartbeat, like an invisible heart beating slowly just under the covers of the room. At first, I thought I could face this fear. But then, there are nights when fear is no longer just a feeling. It has become a reality. I began to feel a change in the air every night. There were moments when I felt like I couldn't breathe, as if the air in the room had become so stuffy that it couldn't pass through my chest. The noises I heard, the shadows I imagined, now seemed like they really existed. And then, one night, when things became unbearably tense, I decided to do something that I had been dreading all this time. I decided to check the corner where all those strange noises were coming from. When I stood up, my hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop. My footsteps echoed in the quiet space, my sound felt like an intrusion into the air, as if it wasn't allowed to exist in this room. I approached the corner, where the humming had begun to become more distinct each night. The light from the bedside lamp was weak enough for me to see the cracks in the wallpaper, but not bright enough for me to make out there was something behind them. I took a deep breath and reached out, feeling like my hand was touching something cold, invisible. Immediately, a strange noise rang out. A sound as if something was moving inside the wall, as if there was a creature right on the other side, maybe even looking at me through those cracks. I stood motionless, my heart pounding in my chest. Cold sweat drenched my forehead, and I felt a cold current run down my spine. A strange feeling spread from my palm, where I was touching the wall. It was an indescribable feeling, as if an invisible force was pushing me away, as if this room did not welcome me, and something in it did not want me to stay. I quickly withdrew my hand, but the humming sound was still there, lingering in the air as if trying to force me to pay attention. A feeling of dizziness surged through me, and just as I was about to turn away, a dark shadow flashed, as fast as lightning, right in front of me. I couldn't see it clearly, but I felt its presence very clearly. It's something different. I stood still, frozen by fear. Part of me wanted to run away, wanted to escape this room immediately, but another part wanted me to stay, to find out what was really going on. Am I imagining things? Or is there really something inexplicable going on here? And then, as I turned back to look into the darkness, a soft sound rang in the air, as if someone was whispering close to my ear. I couldn't hear the words clearly, but I felt that something was trying to communicate with me. Are these shadows trying to tell me something? And do I have the courage to understand those whispers? At this moment, the space in the room had become so heavy that I could feel my every breath, like the air in this room was suffocating me. The small breathing continued, the sound was like something padding from behind the wall, not an invasion, but a strange invitation. A shiver ran down my spine, but I still couldn't stop. Darkness no longer seems like a simple concept. It is not just a lack of light, but a living entity, always moving, always reaching out, encompassing all. I asked myself, what am I seeing? Are all these feelings the product of an overstrained imagination? Or is there something truly out there in the shadows, just waiting to reveal itself? My footsteps moved towards the corner of the wall, where the darkness was thick and the buzzing sound still echoed in the space. I could feel the cold air, and the wall under my hand was so cold that it seemed to have a life of its own. My face was startled when a small noise appeared, something gently touched my hand from inside the wall. I pulled my hand back, but an inexplicable urge made me continue. I took a deep breath, deciding that I could not continue to live in such fear. I pushed hard against the wall. A creaking sound rang out. The wall seemed to be answering, as if resisting my touch. And then, a small crack began to appear. It gradually expanded, enough for me to see an interior space that I had never thought of. It was a space that didn't belong in this room, something so strange, dark and mysterious that I couldn't see clearly inside. Suddenly, a cold wind blew out from the crack, making it impossible for me to breathe. My head was dizzy, and I felt like I was being pulled there, into another dimension. A cold chill invaded my body, making every layer of my skin shiver incessantly. But I can't stop. I can't turn back now. I must continue. When I forced myself through the crack, I entered a completely different space, where there was no light, only pitch-black darkness. An eerie feeling came over me, as if I had entered a world I could not understand, a place where time and space no longer had any meaning. That cold feeling wasn't just the air, but as if I was in an area beyond this world's control. Suddenly, I heard a soft sound, a familiar sound. A sigh, like when someone quietly stands near me. I turned around, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel its presence, something looking at me, watching me, but I couldn't see it. The darkness around me seemed to begin to move. Strange shapes began to appear in the darkness. I couldn't determine what they were, I could only feel that they were watching me, getting closer little by little. Everything around me started to change. Each wall became blurred, as if they were melting into a black, inescapable mist. A voice rang out in the quiet space. I couldn't identify whose voice it was, but it rang clearly in my head. A cold, mysterious voice, as if from a faraway place, a place where there is no light, no life. It says, "You can't leave. You'll never get out of here." My heart beats harder than ever. My body trembled non-stop, but I couldn't leave, couldn't turn back. I felt that I was caught up in something invisible, a strong presence, extremely real, but unable to be touched or seen. I felt like there were a pair of invisible eyes watching my every step, every breath I took. The darkness became more and more dense. It not only surrounds me but also invades every cell and every thought of me. I can't remember clearly how many paths I went through in that space, I only know that I was caught up in a vortex, a maze of fear. But then, something invisible suddenly pulled me out of that spiral. A faint light flashed in front of me, and I felt like I was released back into reality. Something had changed in this space, maybe something had appeared, but I couldn't see it clearly. As soon as I raised my head, I found myself back in the same room where I started. But now, everything is different. The room is no longer the same as before. The cracks in the wall had widened, the wallpaper had strangely peeled off, as if the room itself was changing. And in the air, I could feel the presence of something undeniable, something that had followed me back. The atmosphere in the room now became thicker than ever. I felt a clear change, as if this room was no longer the place I used to live. Something invisible had taken over the space, and I, even though I couldn't see it clearly, knew that its presence was surrounding me. Every step I take in the room, even if it's just a small step, I feel like there are invisible eyes watching me, as if this room is observing my every move, every breath. The night light was still dim, but I felt that the light was no longer strong enough to dispel the darkness. The cold, damp air kept rising, heavy and thick, as if something was squeezing my chest. I can't bear it anymore. This feeling of stress, fear, and confusion has gone on for too long. I want to get out, but I can't stop. With trembling hands, I walked closer to the wall where I had discovered the crack before. I don't know why I came back here, but a strange urge pushed me towards it. Looking through the crack, I could see a dark space that was not at all like this world, a strange space that I could not understand. Suddenly, there was a sudden noise, a sharp sound, as if something was scratching the wall inside. That noise is not simply a sound. It was like a call, an invitation from the depths of the room. Something is trying to escape. My heart sank. I took a step back, but part of me couldn't escape its appeal. I couldn't shake the feeling as if something was waiting for me, as if I had been caught in an inevitable trap. And then, a sudden blast of cold air hit my face, as cold as if I had just opened the door to enter a dark cellar. That coldness seemed to penetrate my body, and I couldn't breathe. Even though I wanted to scream, I couldn't make a sound. I felt its presence, but couldn't see anything. The room, and the surrounding space, seemed to have disappeared, leaving only darkness, leaving only a feeling of being trapped in another space. Somehow, I found myself walking towards the crack again. But this time, it's not just another rift. It opened wide, as if the room had begun to disintegrate, as if a door to another world was opening. I couldn't understand why I continued, but something invisible pulled me along, an irresistible force. Suddenly, a weak light from somewhere began to flash in space. It was not a normal light, but a cold, gray light like the dim moonlight at night. Under that light, I saw myself standing in a large space, but not the old room I used to live in. Everything around me was hazy, covered in a thin mist, as if I was standing in a nightmare. In the distance, I saw a figure standing silently, looking at me. Even though the light wasn't enough to reveal that person's appearance, I still felt their presence very clearly. It was a blurry, indistinct shape, but I knew for sure that they were not human. They stood there, not moving, just watching me. A feeling of extreme fear filled me. My heart was beating strongly, each beat was like screaming in my chest. I wanted to run away, but my body wouldn't listen. I stood still, as if frozen in fear. Then, that voice rang out again, this time clearer than ever. It is not a human voice. It was a low, rumbling sound, as if coming from another world, a place where there was no life. You can't get out. You're stuck here. This feeling, the invisible presence, the inexplicable words, all created an unimaginable fear. I cannot react. I couldn't utter a word. There was only silence, and darkness was enveloping. A heavy feeling pulled me down, as if I were sinking into an endless hole. I couldn't resist, couldn't scream, only the feeling of fear remained, that I was no longer in this world. Something is pulling me down, down deeper, where light cannot reach. The space around me just disappeared, and I began to feel its silence, as if this room was not just a room but a never-ending nightmare. Just like that, I was pulled into complete darkness. But one thing I realized, no matter how caught up I was, no matter where I was, something inside me couldn't be extinguished. An invisible resilience, some strength within me, kept me from surrendering. Something, in this darkness, still holds me back, still gives me the chance to fight. I tried so hard to convince myself that everything I experienced was just a series of events caused by stress and fatigue. Yet there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something I couldn't understand, couldn't explain. The room was the same as before, small, cramped, and full of signs of age, but there was something very different, something implicit in the space, as if this room were not just a place to live but an entity, with its own power. That corner, where I once pulled the bed closer to face strange sounds and sensations, still haunts me. Even though I moved the bed to the middle of the room, even though the air was a little less stuffy, a strange feeling still didn't go away. Every time I walked through it, there seemed to be a change in the air, a vague darkness enveloping me. I couldn't escape the feeling that in that corner, right under the wallpaper, something was waiting. The following nights, I still tried to sleep, but my sleep was no longer restful. I still feel those feelings, even though I can't see anything, but I know that something is watching me, silently waiting for me. Even though I tried everything to banish that feeling, rearranging the furniture, hanging pictures on the wall to create a sense of peace, there was something inside me that couldn't be forgotten. A strange presence still clings to me, although it is not clear, I can feel it in every movement, every breath. One night, when I was so tired and almost exhausted, I found myself standing in front of the window, looking into that corner. At first, I only felt a slight sense of uneasiness, but then, out of the darkness, I saw movement, a fleeting blur of shape. It wasn't clear, but I knew there was definitely something there. Not a shadow, not a physical form, but an invisible presence, a dark force watching me from behind the wall. My heart was beating fast, my mind was spinning. It felt like someone was standing right behind me, looking at me, listening to me breathe. I turned around, tried to look behind me, but there was nothing. Nobody. Just darkness and eerie silence. But at that moment, I felt a cold wind blowing through me, so cold that it felt numb, as if an invisible hand had just stroked my back. A cold feeling invaded me from the inside out, making me tremble non-stop. Even though I knew that there was no one here, I couldn't help but feel that there was something waiting for me. A presence was watching, waiting for me to acknowledge its existence. I couldn't tell what it was, but I was sure it knew me. Fear began to become a part of my life. I can't explain why, but every night, as darkness falls, I feel that presence becoming more and more clear. Not a physical presence, but a murky, invisible ghost that follows me all the time. One night, as I lay in bed, I felt like something heavy was pressing on my body, but I couldn't see it. It felt like an invisible hand was pressing down on my chest, making it difficult to breathe, as if someone was holding me down. I tried to breathe, tried to wake up, but my body felt paralyzed. I couldn't move, couldn't call for help. It feels like I'm stuck between the real world and a world I can't understand. When the nightmare ended and I woke up, drenched in sweat, I realized that I couldn't live like this anymore. I need to find out the truth. I can't continue to live in this invisible fear. But when I returned to the room, I noticed something very strange. Even though I tried to move the bed to the middle of the room still felt unusual. Part of me says it's just stress, lack of sleep, but there's another part of me, a deeper part, that says I don't fully understand this place, this room. It was as if the room was reacting to me, as if every move I made, every decision I made, was being watched and recorded by it. I can't forget the cold feeling I felt those nights. I can't forget the coldness spreading from the corner of the wall. And no matter how hard I try to banish that fear, no matter what I do, I know that I cannot completely ignore it. This room, unlike the others, has a presence that I cannot explain. And then, one night, when I was especially tired, when darkness filled the room, I heard that gentle hum coming from somewhere, a reminder that I wasn't the only one here. An uneasy feeling rose inside me as I looked at that old cabinet, placed in the darkest corner of the garage. I couldn't understand why it was standing there alone, strangely, as if placed in a position where no one wanted to see it. Really, it feels like a part of this space, a part of the old and dusty things I'm trying to tidy up. But that cabinet didn't seem to belong here, as if it had a separate history that I couldn't understand. I tried to regain my composure and continue working, but the flickering light from the light bulb on the ceiling made this space even more eerie. It seemed that every time the light flashed, the cabinet appeared more clearly in my eyes. I feel like there's something lurking in there, though I can't explain what. Suddenly, a small noise rang out behind me. Something like a gentle rubbing sound made me turn around in surprise. But when I looked around, I only saw old boxes and piles of dusty cobwebs. Still no one there. It was just me, and that strange cabinet, still standing motionless in the dark. It's probably because I'm so tired, I told myself, trying to convince myself that nothing strange was happening. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the uneasiness didn't leave me. I returned to my work, pulling a few more tarps out of the pile, but this time, I couldn't stop thinking about the closet. The eerie feeling from it felt like it was spreading throughout the garage, invading my space. When I moved closer to the cabinet, a cold wind suddenly blew across my body, as if an invisible hand touched the back of my neck. I shivered, but tried to ignore it and continue working. Yet every time I turned to look at the cupboard, I couldn't help but feel that it was calling to me, as if there was something waiting for me to open it. I carefully approached the cabinet, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know why, but part of me wanted to open that cabinet, wanted to know what it contained. But another part feels that I should stay away from it, that something in there might be dangerous, or might be waiting to be released. In the end, I decided not to open the cabinet. I don't know if I did the right thing or not, but the feeling of confusion and fear kept me from facing that cabinet. Instead, I turned away, and this time, I no longer heard the gentle rubbing sound. There was only silence, a strange and heavy silence, as if this room was trying to keep something from me that I couldn't understand. As I finished my work and prepared to leave the garage, I took one last look at the cabinet. Although the light was still weak, I could clearly see its shape in the darkness, standing there like a rigid object, unable to move, unable to change. But I know that that closet still has a secret, something that I cannot ignore. At this moment, I couldn't help but remember the strange feeling I had when I entered my apartment for the first time, a feeling of being watched, monitored by something invisible but very real. This cabinet, although not scary at all, gives me a similar feeling. A presence that couldn't be seen, but I couldn't get rid of it. Every time I stood near the closet, that feeling resurfaced, making me confused and afraid. And with that, I left the garage, the feeling of anxiety still clinging to me. I can't explain why the closet makes me feel this way. But one thing I know for sure is, something is waiting, watching, and I may never know what it really is. In the days that followed, I tried to focus on work and daily life, but that closet always existed in my mind. Every time I return to the garage, even though I don't see anything different, I still feel like something is waiting. An invisible presence, an unexplainable insecurity. I couldn't help but ask myself, was that cabinet there before, or did it just appear recently? And am I the only one who feels this way, or have others experienced it before me? On dark nights, when darkness covers the space, I can't help but think about that closet, about what might lie waiting inside it. And will I be brave enough to open it, or will I continue to live with the unknown, a strange existence still smoldering in the darkness? The feeling of anxiety still stuck with me even when I woke up, sweat drenched on my body tense as if I had not completely escaped the nightmare in my sleep. My shirt stuck to my body, and I could feel cold sweat on my forehead. My heart was still beating strongly, each beat pounding like it was about to burst out of my chest. The shadow in the dream, a dark figure with no facial features, just a vague, elongated shape, is still intact in my mind. Now, I can't shake the feeling of being watched. I looked around the room, the old walls and dim light seemed to envelop me. Every time I turned around, the light dimmed, and I could see my image in the window, but unlike before, it wasn't me, but the silhouette of a person standing there, staring at me. The atmosphere in the house became increasingly stuffy. Even though I tried to concentrate on my work, every time I stood near the garage window, I felt a chill rise in my body, making my arms and legs tremble. It felt like someone was standing next to me, right in the dark, not saying anything, just quietly observing. The old cabinet, the rusty lock, and the dead silence surrounding it all made me uneasy. It all serves as a reminder that there is something unexplained, something invisible but always present somewhere in this house. On the third night, when we decided to sleep in, I couldn't sleep. Even though I was tired, I still couldn't stop having strange thoughts about what had happened. The sound of the wind blowing through the window rattled, and strange noises from above as if something was moving in the attic made me unable to calm down. Every little noise startled me, and I couldn't stop thinking about the shadow I had seen in my dream. That night, I lay awake, unable to sleep, when once again I heard a small, faint rustling sound coming from behind the walls. This time, the sound was clearer, as if something was moving inside, and it made me feel that it was coming closer, as if approaching my bed. I felt my chest tighten, my body tense, and I could barely breathe. I didn't dare open my eyes, didn't dare turn around, because I was afraid that if I did, I would see something I couldn't face. This feeling of being watched, has become a part of me. Even when I tried to make sense of everything, to find ways to explain the strange noises and feelings, I still couldn't get rid of the fear in my heart. Whenever I go back to the garage, everything goes back to the way it was before. That cabinet, the rusty lock, and the strange darkness surrounding it all made me uneasy. It was like a door to a world I couldn't understand, where strange and inexplicable things awaited. The next night, as I lay in bed, trying to close my eyes to sleep, I dreamed of that same closet again. In the dream, I stood before it, opened it and saw something, a dark shape, no clear shape, just an invisible shadow standing quietly in there, waiting for me. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stand there, as if frozen in fear. When I woke up, I felt like something was still in the air, in this room. That feeling seemed to haunt me, and I knew that something inexplicable existed here, in the darkness, in this space, in this old house. I knew I had to do something, I had to find out what was going on. But part of me doesn't dare to face the truth, doesn't dare to open that closet again, doesn't dare to face things that I may never understand. And so, I live with fear, with unanswered questions, and with the feeling that there are things that should not be discovered, mysteries that should never be opened. I still remember the feeling I had when I entered that house for the first time, the feeling that something was watching me from within these walls. Every time I think back, I can't escape the fear that there is something still waiting for me, always waiting, in the darkness of the old closet, in the house that I never really owned. A feeling of fear, indescribable, enveloped me as I stood facing that ancient cabinet. Even though the lock had been removed and there was nothing left in it, the cabinet still stood there, as if it were not an inanimate object but a living being waiting for something. Every time I looked at it, a feeling of tension rose in my chest, as if something dangerous was lurking there, just waiting for me to touch it and reveal it. Suddenly, a cold breeze blew through the space, making my skin shiver. That breeze was like an invisible hand gently lifting the curtain of darkness, brushing the back of my neck. I turned around, but the room was still empty, leaving only eerie shadows and strange sounds coming from the corners, my own rapid breathing. The feeling of being watched is clearer than ever. I stood there, seemingly unable to move, but every cell in my body was telling me to run, leaving everything behind. I couldn't escape the feeling that there was an invisible presence in this room, a presence that I couldn't see, but that I could feel. I could even hear sounds that no one else could, faint rustling sounds as if something was moving around me. That closet, even though it was empty, could stir up the air, making the room choking and filled with anxiety. My hands shook as I continued to clean up the remaining belongings in the garage, trying not to let myself get caught up in this strange feeling. But the feeling of fear cannot be dispelled. Even though I was trying to focus on work, even though I was trying to convince myself that everything was just a matter of my imagination, the truth was that I couldn't stop the feeling of being watched. Even though I looked around and shined my flashlight into dark corners, the shadows still seemed alive, always shifting, always appearing and disappearing as part of the room. As I moved closer to the antique cabinet, my body seemed unable to bear it anymore. The feeling of suffocation became stronger and stronger. That cabinet, even though it had been unlocked and had nothing left inside, still made me feel like there was something residing in there, something invisible but always there, waiting to be released. That feeling, the lingering silence, made my heart beat so fast that I could barely breathe. My breathing became rapid, as if I was running away from something invisible. In that moment, I had no more patience. I couldn't face that cabinet another moment. A feeling of fear spread through my body, and I felt like I might lose control if I stood here any longer. It felt like there was an invisible hand tightening around my neck, making me unable to breathe, unable to move. As I stood there, clutching the flashlight, I decided to leave the garage, leaving everything behind. I turned my back on the closet, walked quickly towards the door, but still couldn't help but feel that there was someone, or something, standing right behind me, watching my every step. I quickly closed the door, took a deep breath to regain composure, but the feeling of suffocation still did not let me go. The images, the feelings, still cling to my mind. When I returned outside, the light of day could not dispel the feeling I carried. The sun shines on everything, but it cannot dispel the darkness in my mind, where I know clearly that something incomprehensible is still waiting. When I stepped out into the open space, even though I felt my breathing become easier, the feeling of exposure still followed me, as if I was still monitored by something invisible, a presence that I could not see but always felt. That evening, when Marcus and I sat down, he shared similar feelings. He admitted that he couldn't sleep either, and felt as if something inexplicable was watching him. His words were like a strange sympathy. We didn't say it, but we both felt that there was a presence in this house, something that we couldn't see, but that was slowly taking over this space. Even though we both tried to rationalize everything, a part of us couldn't escape the intense feeling of fear. Every time I entered the garage, the feeling of tension arose. Strange sounds, moving shadows, and the feeling of being watched kept repeating. There seems to be no way to escape it, and the obsession becomes a part of us. I told myself I had to finish this job and get out of the house as soon as possible. But every step, every cleanup, seems to make that fear clearer. And no matter how much we tried to ignore it, no matter how much I tried to convince myself that it was just an imagination, that feeling was still there, like an undeniable ghost. With every step I took through the dark rooms of that house, I felt the tension and heaviness increase. The eerie feeling that has haunted me since the first time I stepped in here is not just strange noises or shadowy shadows, but an invisible, yet clear, presence that always exists within these walls. Even though I tried to explain that it was just because I was stressed, because of the unfamiliar environment, a part of me still couldn't escape the feeling that something invisible was watching my every move. But I'm not the only one who feels that way. When Marcus and I decided to clean out the garage and get rid of the old cabinet, we agreed that we needed to get out of this house. Even though the cabinet had been dismantled and taken away, even though we had erased every trace of it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something still haunted us. Something deep in this house, in its dark corners, had taken possession of us. My feelings became even more pronounced the night I returned to my apartment. Even though I left that house, the darkness still followed me home. I woke up with a start, heard the sound of scratching wood, heard strange sounds, as if something was invading the space. And then, that figure appeared in my mind again, the dark figure standing at the garage window, looking at me. That feeling, its presence, could not be eliminated, no matter how hard I tried to fill the gaps in my mind with light and reason. I couldn't help but wonder if I really saw it, or if my imagination had just drawn something I couldn't understand. However, every time I remember that feeling, a chill runs down my spine, reminding me that something really existed there, in that old house. No matter how I explain it, that feeling still haunts me, inexplicable, but very real. Even when Marcus called me once after I had left, he said that sometimes at night he kept hearing strange sounds from inside the house. And then, one time, his garage door opened by itself even though it had been locked tightly before. The feeling of confusion and uneasiness arose again, and I couldn't help but share with him that something was going on in that house, something we couldn't identify, but it was clearly affecting us. In the days that followed, as I tried to return to normal life, I couldn't shake the memory of that house. The images, the sounds, the feeling of being watched, all are still like a wound that hasn't healed in my mind. Even though I have left that place, I know that I cannot forget those feelings, cannot erase them from my mind. Just by closing my eyes, I could feel the coldness of the garage, the menacing silence, and the feeling that someone was standing there, just waiting for me to return. Every time I pass by a mirror or a reflective surface, I can't help but recall that shadowy image, something that is never clear, but is always there. It stood behind me, an invisible ghost, watching my every step, waiting, and when I turned around, it was gone, but the feeling was still there. I wondered if I had really experienced all of this, or perhaps my deep fears had created these ghosts. Perhaps the obsession of the old house has gone deep into me, affecting my every thought. But nonetheless, I also know that there are corners in this world that we cannot understand. There are spaces where darkness is not just a lack of light, but something alive, a presence that cannot be seen, but cannot be denied. And once we learn of their existence, they can change us forever. The air in that small room was thick and suffocating, as if the air had been compressed for many years. I felt my every breath become heavy, as if I were breathing in a space that I couldn't escape from. The smell of mold and mildew filled my nose, causing me to choke, a feeling of nausea rising in my throat. This room, although nothing special, contained an inexplicable feeling of eeriness. Everything in the room was covered in dust and old furniture, wrapped in tattered bedsheets. Boxes were piled everywhere, seemingly forgotten for a long time. I walked in with caution, full of anxiety. It felt like something was lurking in the dark, quietly observing me, making it impossible for me to relax. Although nothing here was clear, the strange silence and oppressive atmosphere made me feel as if I was not alone. I looked around, hoping to find something that could explain all that had happened. The old walls, the covered chairs, all seemed lifeless, as if this room had never been used, never had life. But then, when the weak light from the lamp shined on the objects in the room, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It seemed that in the darkness, the shapes on the furniture began to change, as if they were moving, though I couldn't see clearly. I can't stand this feeling any longer. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead, and I had to breathe rapidly to try to control the rising panic. I turned around, walked out of that small room and closed the door behind me. But as soon as the door closed, I couldn't help but feel that something was still there, watching me, as if someone was watching me from inside. When I returned to my bedroom, I couldn't shake the strange feeling. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself that it was all just my imagination, the heavy feeling still wouldn't go away. That night, I tried to sleep, but couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. I could hear small sounds, soft noises, like someone was moving in the darkness outside my room. Once again, that feeling, the feeling that something invisible but very real was watching my every step, returned. The next day, I decided I couldn't stay in this house any longer. Marcus and I tried to rationalize everything, but the truth was, we couldn't ignore the strange, undeniable feeling that something beyond our understanding existed in this house. Even after we took the closet out of the house and tried to leave, that feeling stuck with us. I couldn't understand why, but I knew for sure that something inexplicable existed there, in the darkness, in those old rooms. I can't forget the cold, stuffy feeling in those nights, the feeling like someone was standing next to me, right behind me, waiting for me to come back. Those shadows, the strange sounds, and the feeling of being watched still haunt me, even though I've left. That feeling is like a wound that never heals, an obsession that cannot be dismissed. When I got home, I still felt like something dark had followed me home, something I couldn't understand, but was very real. A darkness awaits, invisible but undeniable. In that moment, I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, just a heavy feeling of fear pressing down on my entire body. The door in front of me, which had been carefully blocked, was now strangely ajar, as if someone, or something, was gently opening it without my knowledge. A cold, inexplicable breath blew out from inside, making me feel like I was standing at the edge of an inescapable abyss. Chills ran down my spine, and I couldn't help but feel an invisible, malevolent presence waiting for me to enter. My eyes stared blankly into that gap, where the darkness seemed even thicker than every night before. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself that it was just a slip of my hand, just a wedge being misaligned, the feeling that something, someone, was standing on the other side of the door kept rising, strong and undeniable. That strange feeling, a feeling that I can't explain but is very clear, still sticks with me, making me unable to get rid of it. Intellectually I wanted to say no, but the truth was I felt as if everything was going against me. This door, even though I blocked it, still seemed like it could open at any time, as if there was an invisible force manipulating everything in this house. I stood there, shaking with my hand holding the flashlight, and every time it passed through the darkness, I felt like invisible shadows, strange shapes, were starting to sneak through every corner of the room, eyes that couldn't be seen but were always watching me. My instincts told me I had to leave, but I couldn't leave. The feeling of fear does not allow me. My eyes stopped at the flashlight in my hand, the weak light shining through the door, adding to the tension in the space. Every time the light flashed, the darkness inside seemed to become denser, swallowing everything. Suddenly, a blurry movement appeared in the darkness inside the room. I couldn't see clearly what it was, I only knew that it was a shape, a dark shadow passing by, as fast as lightning, making me unable to breathe. I knew for sure that I couldn't stand here any longer, but when I reached out to close the door, an invisible force made me unable to move. A cold feeling seemed to spread throughout my body, and in that moment, I could do nothing but stand still, feeling that I was being stopped, unable to leave. Finally, with all the strength I had left, I threw myself at the door, pulling it shut with force, making the hinges squeak. My heart was pounding, my body was shaking, and I couldn't help but feel that there was a presence weighing down on me, as if someone was standing right behind me, looking at me, waiting for me to turn around. Even though the room was now quiet again, the silence made my fear more obvious than ever. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare face the shadow in that room. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image more clearly, pitch black darkness, invisible eyes watching me from behind. The feeling of being watched, observed by something that cannot be seen, cannot be explained, cannot be denied. Every night I wake up in confusion, every time I wake up I feel like something is still following me, no matter where I am, no matter what I do. And in my dreams, I still find myself standing in front of that door, feeling trapped in a world I cannot understand, a world where darkness is not just darkness, but a living entity, always watching, always waiting. It's been a long time since I dared to return to that house, but a part of me still can't shake the feeling that the shadow, that strange presence, is still there. Wait. And I know that one day, I will have to face it, no matter how scared I am. I lay still in the dark, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling like it could burst at any moment. The room around me became heavy, every breath became a struggle, as if the air in this room was thicker and harder to breathe than usual. I couldn't explain why, but the familiar feeling, the feeling of menacing silence, returned to me. It was the feeling I felt in that old house, but this time, it was stronger, closer. Once again, I felt that strange presence, as if someone was standing right next to me, watching my every move, my every breath. Even though I moved to another place, even though I tried to leave it all behind, the darkness and fear never left. It felt like there were doors opening wide in the dead of night that, even though they had no handles, could still tear open the space and reveal secrets that I couldn't understand. I suddenly remembered the doors in that house. The doors had no handles, were tightly locked but still opened in the night, automatically slammed shut, making strange noises that I couldn't explain. And I wondered if all that had happened was just an illusion, a combination of tension and loneliness in an old house, or if there was something really there, something invisible, but palpable in the air, in the darkness. I can't sleep. This heavy feeling still clings to me, and the darkness just envelopes me, as if I can't escape it, no matter how hard I try. Every night, as I lay in bed, trying to regain a peaceful sleep, I felt something invisible, an invisible but very real force, standing behind me, in the darkness. Every time I hear small sounds in the room, like light scratching on the wall, I'm startled, my heart beats faster. For a strange moment, I even felt as if a door somewhere in my room had opened, even though I had definitely closed it before. A cold feeling ran down my spine, and I couldn't shake the thought that strange things from my old house were following me here. They never left me, no matter how hard I tried to forget. Every night, I would wake up in the middle of it, cold sweat drenching my forehead, and I felt like I could never completely escape the darkness that house had left behind. Even though I was physically gone, my mind was still bound there, in dark hallways, in doors with no handles, and in an inexplicable feeling of being watched. I recall images of that room, the tightly closed doors that I couldn't open, the shadows passing by in the darkness, and the feeling of fear that filled me. I wondered if I really saw those things or if it was just my imagination running wild, but even as I tried to reason, I felt something undeniable, a presence I couldn't escape. That night, when I woke up in my old hotel room, I felt like I was in another world, a space I couldn't understand. Built in the 1900s, this hotel seems to retain traces of the past, secrets hidden in every dark corner, every mossy wall. I looked into the darkness, heard my own gasp, and felt that there was something still clinging to me, even though I had left that old house. I don't know if I can continue living in this obsession. But I know one thing for sure, that there are doors in life that once opened, they will never completely close. And once you have seen that darkness, you will never be able to forget it. That feeling, that eerie feeling that something was moving in the dark, still wouldn't leave me. Those gentle, steady but cautious footsteps circled the bed, slowly and steadily, making me feel like someone was watching me from very close. Each step twisted my nerves, making the silence in the room suffocating. Every beat of my heartbeat seemed to echo in my ears, so loud and so strong, as if it were about to jump out of my chest. I lay motionless, eyes wide open, not daring to move. I could only listen to each step approaching my bed, then backing away. The rising tension made me unable to control my breathing. I felt the coldness of someone's breath, even though I couldn't see it clearly, but it swept across my face, caressing it like a cold breeze, making me shiver. My eyes looked into the darkness, where there was nothing but vague images, but that feeling, the presence of something invisible but extremely real, lingered, haunting me every second. Even though I turned on the light, nothing changed. The room was still empty, no one, nothing. But I still feel like there is something waiting for me, something that is here, right next to me. I reached for the glass of water on the small table, my hands shaking, trying to convince myself that I was just imagining things. A sip of water, but it seems unable to dispel the tension and stuffiness in the air. I tried to breathe deeply, but each time I felt that presence more clearly. It seemed like it was waiting to enter this space, enter with me, enter the very room that I thought was safe. I can't continue like this. We can't keep living in this fear, in this dark, heavy space. Determined to end this nightmare, I turned off the bedside lamp, allowing darkness to engulf the room. But as soon as darkness returned, the sound rang out again. The footsteps were light, but unmissable, as if something was approaching, surrounding me from all sides. Every step in the dark is a reminder, a sign that I'm not the only one in this room. That presence, although invisible, exists clearly and strongly in the air. Not a dream, not a fantasy. It's real, it's here, right next to me. My heart was racing, and I couldn't escape the feeling like I was being watched. I listened to every step, felt every breath, but the more I tried to listen, the more I realized the silence around me increased my fear. I wondered if this was a nightmare I couldn't wake from, or something beyond my imagination was pulling me into the darkness. On the third night, I realized that I couldn't escape this feeling. I cannot run away from it. And no matter what I do, wherever I go, it will always follow me, like a dark shadow, quiet but full of threats, always lurking, always waiting. When the cold suddenly came, I felt it spread throughout my body, as if the air around me was being pulled down by an invisible force, turning the room cold and stuffy. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly, and my heart started pounding again, as if a strong wave was rising in my chest. I tried to control myself, but my body was still shaking, unable to escape the heavy feeling that was weighing me down. At that moment, a gentle sound, like a very faint scratching sound, began to echo from somewhere in the room. The sound sounded as if a chair was being gently dragged across the floor, little by little, but the direction could not be determined. I held my breath, my ears strained, trying to find its source, but it lingered in the darkness, like something that had never existed, just beginning to take shape, a strange presence that I couldn't understand. My body became stiff, unable to move, as if I were frozen in fear. There was only tension in every nerve, every step in the dark made me feel like an invisible hand was squeezing me tightly. I didn't dare scream, even though I wanted to scream to relieve the rising fear. I could only lie still, eyes wide open, looking into the darkness but unable to escape the menacing silence. I bit my lip, trying not to make any sound. I could only feel my breathing, becoming more and more heavy. When I closed my eyes, I thought I could hear every step, every little noise, coming closer to me. That heavy atmosphere seemed to invade my mind, forcing me to face something that I couldn't understand. Another noise rang out, this time stronger and clearer. The sound of a window opening, or a door somewhere in the hallway. I do not know. But something inside me urged me to leave immediately. However, my body couldn't move. There was a dead silence for another second, then a faint scratching sound rang out again from a corner of the room. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I rushed out of bed, my limbs shaking, and quickly turned on the light switch, lighting up the whole room. As light filled the room, I realized that nothing had changed. The door is closed tightly, everything is as before. There was no one there, nothing scary. However, that feeling, that suffocating feeling, still refused to leave me. That worry and fear still haunts me, and I can't explain why. Is it all just my imagination? Or is there something truly out there in the shadows, waiting to be discovered? Unable to continue like this, I decided to leave this place. I couldn't bear it any longer, even though nothing concrete had happened to explain this fear. I turned back into the dim hallway, walking hastily, and as I left the room, a heavy feeling clung to me, as if I had left a part of myself behind in that room. And no matter where I go, no matter what I do, I can't escape the feeling that something remains in that darkness, something I can't explain, can't understand. When the cold suddenly came, I felt it spread throughout my body, as if the air around me was being pulled down by an invisible force, turning the room cold and stuffy. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly, and my heart started pounding again, as if a strong wave was rising in my chest. I tried to control myself, but my body was still shaking, unable to escape the heavy feeling that was weighing me down. At that moment, a gentle sound, like a very faint scratching sound, began to echo from somewhere in the room. The sound sounded as if a chair was being gently dragged across the floor, little by little, but the direction could not be determined. I held my breath, my ears strained, trying to find its source, but it lingered in the darkness, like something that had never existed, just beginning to take shape, a strange presence that I couldn't understand. My body became stiff, unable to move, as if I were frozen in fear. There was only tension in every nerve, every step in the dark made me feel like an invisible hand was squeezing me tightly. I didn't dare scream, even though I wanted to scream to relieve the rising fear. I could only lie still, eyes wide open, looking into the darkness but unable to escape the menacing silence. I bit my lip, trying not to make any sound. I could only feel my breathing, becoming more and more heavy. When I closed my eyes, I thought I could hear every step, every little noise, coming closer to me. That heavy atmosphere seemed to invade my mind, forcing me to face something that I couldn't understand. Another noise rang out, this time stronger and clearer. The sound of a window opening, or a door somewhere in the hallway. I do not know. But something inside me urged me to leave immediately. However, my body couldn't move. There was a dead silence for another second, then a faint scratching sound rang out again from a corner of the room. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I rushed out of bed, my limbs shaking, and quickly turned on the light switch, lighting up the whole room. As light filled the room, I realized that nothing had changed. The door is closed tightly, everything is as before. There was no one there, nothing scary. However, that feeling, that suffocating feeling, still refused to leave me. That worry and fear still haunts me, and I can't explain why. Is it all just my imagination? Or is there something truly out there in the shadows, waiting to be discovered? Unable to continue like this, I decided to leave this place. I couldn't bear it any longer, even though nothing concrete had happened to explain this fear. I turned back into the dim hallway, walking hastily, and as I left the room, a heavy feeling clung to me, as if I had left a part of myself behind in that room. And no matter where I go, no matter what I do, I can't escape the feeling that something remains in that darkness, something I can't explain, can't understand. Every time I think about what happened in that old hotel, a heavy, gloomy feeling rises up, as if the darkness still haunts me. I couldn't erase the memory of the stuffy atmosphere in the room, the feeling that I couldn't escape no matter how hard I tried. That feeling still follows me, like an inescapable ghost. The footsteps quietly circling the bed, that invisible but very real presence, is still a part of me, a part that cannot be dismissed. Even though I left that place, the memories of the cold nights, the strange noises, and the feeling of being watched continue to cling to me, haunting me. The wind rushing through the window, the gently fluttering curtains, and the faint footprints on the carpet, all are unforgettable images. Even when I returned to my apartment, I couldn't rest easy. Every night, every time I turn off the light and fall asleep, I long for that presence to return, even though I don't want to admit it. The cold feeling at the foot of the bed, the gentle breath on my skin, all of it is like a nightmare that still haunts me, from which I cannot escape. There were nights when I woke up in the middle of the night, my hands sweaty, my heart pounding, and my eyes staring into the darkness, afraid that something was still lurking there. I felt the invisible, inexplicable darkness that still existed in the air around me. Every time I tried to calm down, a part of me trembled in fear, as if that presence was still here, always waiting. I don't know if I'm living in a nightmare, or if it's all just a combination of stress, fatigue, and loneliness in a strange space. But one thing I know for sure, there is no way to explain what happened in that hotel. And even though I left, some part of me still felt that the invisible existence, the presence in the darkness, was still following me. As a reminder, there are dark corners that people should never enter, and there are memories that cannot be erased no matter how hard you try. Every time I think about it, I feel the cold and darkness waiting for me, as if a part of me is still stuck there, in the long dark hallways of the old hotel, in those silent footsteps, and in that endless cold. We found a hidden wall that no one had noticed before. Its surface, smooth and different from the surrounding walls, made me unable to take my eyes off it. When I reached in to touch it, a cold feeling enveloped me, as if there was a thick layer of air between me and it. I felt another wave of fear rising inside me, but I still tried to focus on my task. At the same time, my brother, his face pale, took a step back, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "We have to open it," he said, but his voice sounded uncertain, as if he himself didn't want to discover what was hidden behind that wall. I could sense the fear in him, and I couldn't understand why. We have been in this house for so long, but since the renovation began, that strange feeling has never left. I couldn't say a word. I feel as if everything around me is slowing down. The smell of damp wood was in the air, our gasps mixed with the sounds of the surrounding objects, debris, dirt, and darkness. Each shadow, each crack, seems to have its own story, something inexplicable, but extremely clear. Finally, I nodded, determined to open that wall, to address the questions we had never been able to answer. But just as I started using the crowbar to pry at the wall, I heard a noise from above my head, an eerie sound, like a large object being dragged across the floor, over and over again. A feeling of horror came over me when I realized that it was not an ordinary noise, but something alive, moving. We stopped immediately. The air became thick, as if we couldn't breathe. That feeling, like something was nearby, enveloped us. I can't bear it anymore. In a reflex, I turned around and hurriedly walked out of the attic, not daring to look back. Every step I took felt like someone was chasing me from behind. Those sounds continued to echo in my head, like a whisper, a warning that there was something unexplained and undiscovered. We never opened that wall. The eerie noises from the attic continued into the night, and although we found no trace of mice or squirrels, I couldn't help but sense that something was still living in that house, waiting. And I know I can never go back there again. The oppressive atmosphere, the undeniable presence, are still imprinted in my mind, like a wound that cannot heal. Late at night, when I sit alone in a dark room, I feel that emptiness, that terrifying silence, and sometimes I hear footprints that I can't determine where they come from. At that moment, I wondered if I had brought something with me from that house, a part of the darkness or something worse. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something that hadn't completely left, still clinging to me in the darkness of my mind, always waiting. Memories of that house, of what my brother and I went through, still cling to me like a burden that cannot be lifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been clinging to us since we entered. Even though we tried to forget, tried to run away, the feeling of being watched still existed, constantly haunting my mind. The scene in the attic, when strange marks on the walls and floor seemed to be written by an invisible hand, is still imprinted in my memory. The wall with ancient symbols, the scratches rising from the floor, the inaudible but felt footsteps in the air, everything made me feel like I was living in a never-ending nightmare. And even though we left, that feeling never went away. When we left the house, it was not simply a matter of letting go of an old structure, but a pressing decision to free ourselves from something greater. No matter how hard we tried to erase it from our minds, there was still a part of me that felt like I had left a part of my soul there, in that claustrophobic space where there was no explanation for the strange phenomena we witnessed. The house, though abandoned, was still there in the dark. In quiet moments late at night, I often sit alone in my new apartment, look up at the ceiling, and feel that eerie atmosphere again. The fleeting shadows and footprints that I thought were just hallucinations return to my mind. I never really understood why that space had such power. But I don't need to understand anymore. The only thing I know is that once I stepped in, I couldn't shake that memory. Every time I look at the wall or face the darkness in my room, I can't help but feel that something is still watching me, even though I have left the house. Although there is no evidence to prove it, the feeling is real. The feeling of being watched, observed by something invisible, still lingers. It never left completely. Even though the house was left behind, I still felt that presence watching over me. It was like a part of me was trapped in the old brick walls, in the dusty, dimly lit hallways. And every time I passed through the shadows, every time I touched things I thought were harmless, I felt that strange feeling again, that there was something that had been there and had always been there, waiting, watching from a place I couldn't see. Don't let yourself get caught up in that feeling of paranoia, but you can't. Every time the doorbell rings, it's like a call from the past, a reminder of what I've tried to leave behind. I felt like I was torn, unable to decide whether I was dreaming or living in an actual nightmare. My heart was filled with fear and confusion that made me unable to stop and could only continue to find ways to convince myself that everything would be okay. The house still has a strange attraction, it does not let me go. Every night when I think I've forgotten, when I think I've banished everything from my mind, a heavy feeling comes over me. I cannot deny the fact that the strange things that happen there still haunt me, like a dark shadow, silent but strong. Last night, when I heard the doorbell ring again, I no longer had the courage to open the door. The silence that followed only increased my tension, as if someone was standing outside, not saying anything, just waiting. But when I looked through the window, there was nothing but darkness. I had to remind myself that everything was just my imagination, but that feeling, the feeling of being watched, didn't leave me. No matter how hard I tried to protect myself by replacing the doorbell, checking every door lock, and ensuring absolute security, that feeling still wouldn't go away. Even in broad daylight, I still felt like there was something lurking, watching me from somewhere in this house. The crickets, the small noises in the yard, are now becoming scary, each sound makes me panic as if someone is watching my every step. Finally, I decided to face this fear. I had to go back to the house, I had to face what had happened. Although I wasn't sure if I had the courage to do so, I knew that only then could I free myself from the unrelenting feeling of obsession. Because whether I like it or not, this feeling, this darkness still exists in me. It is not easy to let go of those who have entered it. And perhaps, that house will always be a part of me, whether I try to leave it or not. But within a short time, I realized that this garden, although beautiful and lush during the day, hides something different at night. An eerie silence fell over the house, and even though everything seemed normal, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was lurking, waiting in the shadows. I can't explain why, but every night, as darkness falls, I feel like something is lurking, watching me from the darkness of the garden, where the plants seem to be crouching, as if they, too, are listening. The sound of night animals rustling in the bushes only added to my sense of unease. It seemed like everything became threatening as the darkness enveloped me, and every sound, no matter how small, became scary, as if someone was standing right outside the window, listening to my every step. One of the most memorable nights, I heard the doorbell ring in the middle of the night, like a warning. But when I opened the door, there was no one. The gate was still tightly closed, with no signs other than the quiet darkness covering the campus. I couldn't understand why the doorbell was ringing, and the strange feeling of an outside presence increased. It's like a challenge that I can't explain. How can a bell sound without anyone being there? And what's worse is that, even though I replaced the doorbell and checked it thoroughly, everything continued to happen the same way. There were still nights when the doorbell rang again, startling me awake in the middle of the night. It feels like someone is still standing on the porch, waiting, looking in. Sometimes I think I can hear faint footsteps, passing through the hallway, but when I look back, there is only silence. This scares me, and I can't understand why this keeps happening. I don't talk about this with many people, because I'm afraid they'll think I'm haunted by stress and paranoia. But how can I explain that every night I wake up feeling like something is watching me? I tried everything to make myself feel safe, checking all the windows, gates, and door locks, but even though I did all that, I still couldn't shake the feeling that some force was still waiting outside. There are nights when I wake up, drenched in sweat, and I hear the doorbell ringing in my dream, alarming me. When I looked around, there was no one, but I felt it was true, that something had come and was standing there, right outside the door. I can't explain it, but I know it's not just my imagination. There was something there, and it refused to let me go. Every night when I look through the window, I can feel that presence, even though I can't see it. Every doorbell ringing, every cold wind passing by, is like a reminder that I cannot escape that presence. It may not be an entity, but it is still very real, and it is still there, waiting. I know that I cannot escape this feeling. Whether I like it or not, my house and everything I've experienced in it will always be with me. There was no logical reason for me to feel this way, but the feeling stuck with me, haunted me. And during long nights, I will always wonder if I am being deceived by my own mind, or if there is really something scary lurking from the darkness, just waiting for me to let my guard down for a moment to appear. I stood there, almost unable to move, only hearing the sound of my name echoing in the quiet space. Every word that voice uttered was like a cut into the air, cold and threatening. My heart ached with fear, but I couldn't find the words to respond. My limbs felt as if they were frozen, my mind was confused and hazy, but I still couldn't escape the strange feeling that someone was standing right behind me, in the dark, even though I couldn't see them. A gentle breeze made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I took a step back. All my senses were tense, as if they were trying to detect something dangerous approaching. I turned around, but there was nothing but thick darkness and cold air. I was startled when the door behind me suddenly creaked, even though I was sure I had closed it tightly before. My heart was pounding, and I felt like I was standing on a cliff, just one step away from falling into the abyss. I took a deep breath, trying to regain composure. Every step I take now feels like a long journey. The feeling of fear was like a wave surrounding me, as if darkness had filled every corner of this house, covering my thoughts, feelings, and fears. I went back to the bedroom, feeling like an invisible force was pushing me backwards. My back was drenched with sweat, and even though the lights were on, I still couldn't dispel the darkness from my mind. As I lay back in bed, I swear I could feel that presence in the darkness. I can't explain it, but the feeling is too strong, too clear to ignore. Something is watching me, even though I can't see it. My thoughts were chaotic, and I couldn't take it anymore. I want to leave, want to run away from everything that's haunting me, but I can't leave this place. This strange feeling still clings to me, like a burden that cannot be erased. The next night, I woke up in a panic, feeling like there was a dark shadow hovering around my bed, just waiting for me to relax and pounce. I quickly turned on the light, but there was only the weak light of the flickering night light bulb, not enough to light up this dark room. The feeling of fear rose within me again, and I wondered if I had actually seen something, or if it was just my mind playing tricks on me, leading me into a world full of hallucinations. I cannot live forever in this situation. The long nights kept repeating. Every time the doorbell rang, I felt like I was being dragged into a never-ending nightmare. My name is whispered through the air, like a warning, a reminder that I can never escape that watchful eye. Maybe I was just imagining things, but the feeling was too real, too vivid for me to deny. Every time I think I've escaped it, the doorbell rings again, and I feel that darkness again, as a part of me. The feeling that cannot be escaped, cannot be erased. It will always be a part of me, no matter how far I run. The darkness seemed thick, something suspended in space as if an invisible presence was standing right in front of me. I tried to breathe deeply, but the air in my lungs became thick, making it difficult to breathe. The motion sensor lights continued to flicker. Each time they turned on they created a blurry shape, turning the shadows of the trees into strange silhouettes of people. My steps seemed unsteady, and I felt like I was being pulled into something inexplicable. As I approached the fence, the wind suddenly blew past, making me shiver. I stared at the faint wooden planks ahead, but couldn't see clearly. Something in the darkness seemed to be waiting, and a cold feeling ran down my spine, making it impossible to move. I didn't know what to do. I just stood still in the dark, my hands shaking as I tried to hold on to something to feel safe. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a whisper that was almost inaudible, but obviously very close. My heart was pounding so hard that I felt like my throat was tight and I couldn't breathe. The voice whispered my name, softly but clearly. It wasn't a normal sound, but something vague, as if from a place very far away, but also very close, right behind me. At that moment, I couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there, motionless, with a feeling of fear like an invisible hand was strangling me. The wind blew again, startling me awake from my paralysis. I turned around quickly, but only saw empty space, no one. The fence door was still tightly closed, with no sign of anyone standing behind. But the feeling of being watched still can't go away. I quickly went back inside the house, closed the door tightly and didn't dare go out again. The atmosphere in the house became more stuffy than ever. I could feel that presence, as if darkness had entered the house, waiting, watching me from every angle. Every little noise in the house, from the refrigerator to my own footsteps, startled me. The feeling of being watched persisted, seemingly inescapable, no matter how hard I tried to calm myself. The fear grew, and I began to doubt myself. Am I imagining all of this? Am I being paranoid? But every time I think I've completely ignored it, it reappears, like an indelible reminder. The feeling that I was never truly alone, that there was something in the darkness waiting for me. Day after day, I continued to live with this feeling, trying to fill my mind with work and daily activities. But nothing can help me forget the darkness that is following me. And every time I hear a noise, every night, I wait for the bell, the whisper, the footsteps that I can't explain. Even though I couldn't quite understand what was happening, I knew that I would never be able to shake this fear. The whispers, the cold winds, all confirmed that there was something in the darkness, watching me, and would never let go. On my last night in the house, I clearly felt the weight of every moment. The living room, despite being filled with packing boxes and piled up furniture, was eerily empty. The shadows of the chairs and bookshelves evoke a feeling of loneliness and isolation, as if the house is refusing to say goodbye. The light from the table lamp danced weakly, casting long shadows on the wall, forming strange shapes that I couldn't explain. Cold sweat drenched my skin, my mouth was dry and every breath became heavy. My mind was confused, a feeling of anxiety filled the air. Every time I heard a small noise, a tree branch hitting the window, a hiss from the walls, I jumped and stood up, trying to find a logical reason for the sounds. But every time I stood up, I felt the space around me become more and more oppressive, as if something was watching me, waiting for me to make a wrong move. The darkness became thicker as time passed, each moment lasting like an eternity. My stress reached its peak when I could no longer tell the line between reality and nightmares. Everything in this house seems to have changed, becoming an invisible trap, inviting me to continue gnawing away at my fear. Everything became blurry when the doorbell rang again. That sound echoed in the room, making me unable to stop shaking. I stood there, my heart beating fast, feeling like it was vibrating in my body, pushing me into another space, a space of fear and paranoia. I couldn't understand why that sound appeared. No one stood at the door, no one in the yard. The more I try to explain everything, the more I feel its absurdity. How could someone knock on the door at this time? How can there be a presence that keeps following me? But as I slowly walked towards the door, the faint flickering light illuminating my face in the mirror, I felt like I couldn't take it anymore. Suddenly, I heard the whisper again, this time clearer than ever. It called my name again. This time there was no doubt, the sound came close to me, as if it were standing right behind me. A cold feeling ran down my spine as I turned around, but no one was there. There was only thick, heavy air, covering me like an invisible cloak. When I looked through the window, I only saw inexplicable shadows, blurry, indistinct images. I felt like I was being watched, like something was silently waiting for me to do something wrong, waiting for me to turn around and be caught. Every thought in my head was spinning, making it impossible for me to focus on anything. Even though I tried to stay calm, I couldn't escape the feeling that that presence was still lurking in the darkness. Finally, I couldn't bear it anymore. I slammed the door shut and collapsed to the floor, trying to take deep breaths to regain control. But the air in the room seemed to stop circulating, and that fear touched me, again. I know I can't live forever in this situation. And then I decided, I had to leave, even if I had to face regret or uncertainty. The next day, I finished packing and prepared to leave. Even though everything still seemed normal, I couldn't shake that feeling, which I knew would stay with me for the rest of my life. The feeling that a home, a certain space, never lets you go. But the silence in this house is scary. It wasn't the normal silence I often saw in empty houses. This was a heavy silence, as if the house was waiting for someone to do something, but no one dared to do anything. The light from the flashlight only highlights old, dusty objects and fills empty spaces, making the atmosphere even heavier. We walked through each room, each step seemed to have resistance from the walls, as if something was stopping us. As I stopped in a room on the left, I couldn't help but see an old painting on the wall, which looked like it had been repainted many times but still had cracks and faded colors. It makes me feel like a part of this house never really died, but is waiting to wake up again. Julian walked towards the kitchen, but before long, he returned with a puzzled look on his face. "Something isn't right here," he said, his voice a suspicious whisper. "It feels like someone lived here, but it wasn't human." We continued onward, entering less interesting rooms, where the light from the flashlight only made the overlapping shadows clearer. The windows were covered with dirt, and the air in the house seemed to be compressed, not a single breath of fresh air could enter. At this point, Matt began to feel uncomfortable no longer. "We should go," he said, his eyes never leaving the window opposite, where the darkness was as thick as a dark cloud. I don't know why, but I felt as if he saw something there. His eyes were filled with worry and fear. We quickly turned around near the back door, but when I turned around to look, a soft sound reached my ears. It was a whisper, a soft voice, indiscernible, but close enough that I felt it in my spine. "Just keep going," that voice seemed to echo in my head. Unable to bear it any longer, I rushed out, filled with confusion and fear. I didn't say anything more, but in my heart I knew one thing: something in that house still refused to let go. Every step I took out there, I felt like something was chasing me, waiting for a moment of weakness to get closer. We didn't go back to that house again. But when I look back, I have the feeling that something is still there, in that house. What I couldn't understand, the whispers and the suffocating silence, still followed me, tormenting me and making me restless. The question of that house, of what really happened there, will forever remain a mystery in my mind. In the complete darkness, the feeling that we were no longer the only people in the house became clearer than ever. My heart was beating so hard that I could feel the vibrations in my ribs. I couldn't say anything, couldn't move, just listen to every smallest sound, those footsteps, still clear and not ours. Those footsteps paused for a moment before continuing, almost an undeniable reminder that something was moving around us. The light from the flashlights, even though they were turned off, was still clearly visible in my eyes. I felt every breath I took, heavy and anxious, as if the air in the house had become thicker, suffocating me. A feeling of suffocation surrounded me, as if the walls themselves were tightening, compressing life in this narrow space. There was no escape, only darkness and the sound of footsteps getting closer and closer. Julian suddenly motioned for us to follow him, but I felt a hesitation, as if my instincts were warning me against continuing. But then, with a step full of determination, we continued moving, engrossed in the darkness, trying to find out what was hiding in the walls of this house. The next door we opened brought us to a large room, and the atmosphere here was different. The cold feeling spread from every corner, making my skin numb. In that space, even though the flashlight's light could only illuminate a small part of the room, I still felt like something was looking at me from the deep darkness. Seemingly ordinary details, such as a large table covered in dust, or a gently swaying rocking chair, suddenly become strange, inexplicable images. I feel its presence everywhere, in every shadow, in every crevice of space. Suddenly, the sound of the engine returned. It rang again, no longer faint but clearer and closer. A hissing sound and the sound of the saw being crushed against something metal echoed throughout the room. The three of us were silent, only tension lingering in the air. Julian turned to look at me and Matt, his eyes filled with worry, as if he couldn't understand what was going on. "We have to go," Matt whispered, and it seemed like he no longer wanted to continue this search. His hesitation spread to me, but I still couldn't stop. "Something tells me we need to understand better." I looked towards the window, where the moonlight was sparkling into the room, and I felt an invisible fear, as if something was watching us from the other side of the house. Once again, my steps were unsteady. The feeling of fear is still tormenting every cell in my body. I didn't know what I was running from, but the deeper I went into the house, the more I felt like I couldn't go back. There was no escape, no answers, only the thick oppression of growing fear. We continued, sneaking through each room, seemingly deeper into a never-ending land. And then, as we stopped in a dark hallway, I knew I was faced with something I couldn't understand. The footsteps, the strange noises, everything led me to an inevitable end. An outcome that I know cannot be explained in words, can only be felt in every moment, in the darkness of this ghostly house. However, the rest of me couldn't convince myself that what had happened could have been just a coincidence. The feeling of being watched still clung to me like a dark cloud, an invisible ghost that I couldn't separate. The three of us walked silently towards the end of the street, occasionally looking back at the house that left a deep impression on us. That scene still appears in my mind. The house is silent, steady and scary. Memories of moonlight reflecting in the windows, invisible footsteps around the yard, all seemed vivid even after we had left the grounds. As we continued walking, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that even though we had left the house, it was still there, watching from afar. Strange feelings and haunting noises still echoed in my mind. Every step, every gentle sound, all evoked in me doubts and inexplicable insecurity. As much as I wanted to believe that we had escaped those strange things, a part of me still felt scared, not only because of what had happened but also because of the feeling that we had not yet truly escaped that house. Did the house choose these moments to reveal its dark side? Or are we just victims of our own stress and imagination? When the light of the street lamp shone on us, I couldn't shake that feeling of insecurity. The other houses on the street stood there, dark and cold, with nothing but lifeless walls from which I could feel no safety. We left without saying a word, each of us carrying our own fears. And although I tried to convince myself that all that had happened was my imagination, fear was deeply ingrained in me. There was no way for me to forget the feeling that something had followed us, something invisible but real, always there, lurking in the darkness. Persistent fear that cannot be dispelled. Every step I took, every sound I heard, seemed to connect back to what had happened in that house. The strange footprints in that forest still haunt me, as if something was waiting for me in the darkness, waiting for me to turn around and face it. Sometimes, I wonder if I am falling into a cycle of invisible fear that I have created for myself. But there was a feeling I couldn't explain, a feeling that something real, something beyond my ability to explain, was watching me. It wasn't exactly a ghost, nor was it an intruder. It was like a presence, vague and untouchable, but so clear in the feeling that I couldn't deny it. Every time I try to live normally, the fear returns. It wasn't a specific sound or shape, but something just out of sight, something that could be heard but not seen, like an invisible breath chasing me from behind. I don't know if I can really escape that house, or if I'm just living in an illusion, a loop of fear. On quiet nights, when the moonlight shines through the window, I feel like I'm being watched, as if something is lurking in the darkness, waiting for me, to tell me that no place is safe. There is an undeniable truth in this feeling, a feeling that I cannot shake no matter how many years pass. A reminder that there are things in life that we cannot understand, cannot see, but can still feel, every time the darkness begins to spread again. Now, every time I look outside, every time the moonlight shines through the window, I can't help but feel that there is something still looking at me, still waiting, in the darkness that I cannot reach. Part of my life. But every time I returned to the house, a familiar feeling came back, a feeling as if I had missed something important, something that was still lingering around me. The house still maintained its calm and perfect exterior, but I couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. That feeling was not imagined, but an invisible but clear presence in my heart. In the following days, I tried to get used to a more normal rhythm of life, but the darkness of the house still covered me, like a shadow that always followed me wherever I went. I spent my time working, meeting friends, trying to forget the strange sounds and shadowy images I had seen. But every night, I feel an inexplicable anxiety, as if someone is standing outside the window, waiting for me. That feeling was not due to stress, but due to something beyond my control, beyond my ability to explain. One night, after everything was quiet, I heard footsteps crunching in the yard, just like last time. My heart was pounding and I couldn't help but feel an invisible presence watching me from the outside. The feeling was so strong, I could almost feel the cold breath touching the back of my neck. I wondered if I was crazy, or if this house really held something inexplicable. My feeling of fear does not come from ambiguity but from the truth that I cannot face. All I know is I can't go back to that house. It's not the place for me anymore. Every time I think of the house, memories of strange sounds and unclear figures come back, a reminder of something I cannot completely escape. When I clean and arrange things, sometimes I still feel that presence, something lurking in the darkness. And even though I tried to move away from those memories, a part of me still couldn't avoid the obsession with the house, with the footsteps, with the shadows, with the things that I couldn't see but still felt, making me feel like I couldn't breathe. I swallowed hard, trying to control my rising anxiety. At this moment, all my senses were on edge, and I felt that presence, not just in the room, but in the air around me, like something invisible was weighing heavily on my every breath. Even though I tried to stay calm, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was looking at me, following my every step. I turned my back and touched the door handle, not daring to look at the dim figures reflected in the glass. Every minute that passes feels like a century. In this dark night, the loneliness and quiet of the apartment seemed to transform into something darker and heavier, as if the space itself had become part of a threat that I could not escape. Okay, nothing here, I told myself, but couldn't stop looking into the dark corners of the room. I tried to close the balcony door quickly, but when I did, I heard a soft sound from behind, like something was moving very slowly, very carefully, as if waiting for the opportunity to enter. I don't dare go back, I just know that I can't leave this place. Light from the city shines through the glass, highlighting the shadows in the room. Every light bulb, every reflective object becomes strange silhouettes, as if they have their own life. And I, standing there, in the middle of the silent and dark room, began to doubt whether what I was experiencing was real, or just the product of a disturbed imagination. But nothing could explain the heaviness and suffocation I felt. A part of me knows clearly that no matter how hard I try to explain or avoid it, that feeling will still follow me, always present somewhere in this house. Think about what happened that night. But unlike me, he couldn't shake the feeling the house left behind. Even though he tried to normalize things, the eyes and shadows we saw still haunted both of us. We were both unable to face what happened directly, and sometimes, I wondered if what we witnessed was actually real, or just a product of our paranoia and stress. Now, every time I look out the window on rainy nights or dark evenings, I always wonder if I hear a gentle tapping sound, or if darkness is waiting in some hidden corner of my vision. The sounds, shapes, and shadows continued to pursue me even though I had left that house. The truth was, that fear was not just the shadows we saw, but an invisible feeling of a presence we couldn't explain, something that had never happened but was still there, clinging and making me unable to shake it off. When I went back to thinking about what happened in that house, I knew that it wasn't just paranoia, but also memories of something that I couldn't fully understand. And maybe, in some deep part of my mind, I don't want to understand. Vintage furniture, but I only heard my own voice in my head, as if those sounds didn't really exist. I began to feel a split between what I saw and what I felt. This vast room is not just a museum, but a living space full of hidden memories, untold stories, and perhaps silhouettes of the past. As I walked deeper into the house, I couldn't ignore the feeling that someone was watching. My eyes moved quickly from corner to corner, trying not to show my fear, but part of me couldn't help but feel another presence there. Maybe it was just ancient mirrors that reflected blurred images of the past, or maybe they were traces left over from solemn gatherings, but every step I took seemed to awaken something I couldn't explain. We continued to move through the living rooms, the long and gloomy hallways, and could not help but notice that everything here had a quiet beauty, not of peace, but of strangeness and sometimes coldness. Every painting hanging on the wall seemed to be watching us, and I could feel that silence as a punishment, a reminder that these spaces had seen too much and there was now no turning back. Every step I took seemed to last longer, as if the space in this villa had changed shape, wanting to make me feel isolated and separate from the outside world. Every sound, no matter how small, was amplified, and I felt myself falling deeper and deeper into a state of utter confusion. I can't escape the feeling that this house knows I'm there, knows what I feel, and is making me feel every corner of it. Whenever I turned my head, I thought I saw a shadowy figure passing by in an empty room, or a strange shadow falling from the old carpet, as if this house was playing a joke on me. And when I looked upstairs, where the ballroom was once the center of luxurious gatherings, I felt a strange attraction, as if someone had once stood there, waiting, and now, that figure still lingered in the space. Every step through the rooms filled with delicate yet faded furniture made me feel like I was passing through another world, a world that did not belong to me. I tried to ignore that fear and tried to follow the group, but my anxiety kept rising. Every little noise in the house, every shadow I thought I saw, made me more confused. I couldn't resist the feeling that something old and dangerous, was quietly watching me, waiting for a moment of weakness to appear. By the end of the tour, I felt like I had taken a part of that house with me, not the old walls or the antique items, but the inexplicable feeling, the oppressive stillness, and the fear that a part of me would always be trapped in that darkness. The mansion is not just a historical relic, but a place that has retained too many things, too many emotions that cannot be released, and maybe, there is something waiting in the darkness of that house, something that never really leaves. Happened many times before. He asked me if I was sure about what I had seen and if I felt okay. I could only nod, trying to suppress the uncomfortable feeling in my body, but couldn't hide the confusion in my eyes. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, an aberration caused by the dim light and prolonged tension. Still, that feeling didn't go away. I still feel the cold gaze from that shadowy figure, the image of the girl in the pale dress, who seemed to have been standing there for a long time, just waiting for an appearance. Even though I tried to push it out of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about her silence, and about the inexplicable tension that weighed on me every time I thought about it. We continued touring the mansion, but I couldn't concentrate on the tour guide's explanations anymore. Every room, every hallway I pass gives me the feeling like something is lurking in hidden corners, observing me, following my every step. The eyes of the paintings on the wall continued to look at me hauntingly, as if they knew about things I had never dared to face. As we left the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left some part of myself there. Sometimes, in the evenings, I found myself standing and looking at the mansion from afar, wondering if that shadow was still there, continuing to wait in the living room, looking out through the windows, never letting me truly escape from it. I don't know if that girl is part of the house's history, or just a hallucination in my mind, but one thing I'm sure of is, the atmosphere in that mansion changed me in a way that I can't explain. And no matter how hard I try to forget it, I know that there will be nights when I can't stop thinking about that figure, standing quietly in the dark, staring back at me, a reminder that not everything we see is reality, and that some things can never be explained. A feeling of suffocation enveloped me, my body seemed to freeze in that moment, as the ghostly woman's eyes seemed to penetrate through me. My eyes were wide open, my heart was beating wildly, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to scream, but only cold air and silence filled the space around me. I tried to step back, step by step, while her eyes followed me, a presence that made me feel as if I was standing in front of something invisible but very real. Cold sweat poured down my spine, my every movement felt like a protest against an incomprehensible force, but I still couldn't leave. A soft sound came from behind me, a soft, faint breathing, as if someone was standing very close. I turned around, but there was nothing but ancient bookshelves, still intact, still full of dust. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, following my every step. I wanted to breathe deeply, wanted to calm down, but it seemed that the more I tried, the stronger and more erratic my heart became. In a frantic moment, I realized I couldn't stand still anymore. I turned around and rushed out of the library, running quickly through the hallway, not daring to turn back even once. My footsteps echoed in the empty space, there seemed to be nothing but dead silence surrounding me. My eyes opened wide in fear, but I didn't dare look at the paintings or the windows anymore. I just want to get out of this place. When I finally reached the lobby, I felt like I had just escaped a nightmare. Every step I take gets lighter, but the fear has not left me. I stood there, breathing heavily, wondering if it was really what I saw, or if I was just being haunted by stories I had imagined. But part of me knows that I can't lie to myself forever. The things I saw in that mansion, the strange feeling of presence, were all too real. And even though I left that place, it seemed like those ghosts would never leave me. The silhouettes still follow me in every dream, in every silent moment, reminding me that there are things that cannot be explained, and there are things that we cannot avoid. I don't know what I will face in the future, but one thing I am sure of, those shadows are not things that can be easily forgotten. The strange and heavy feeling still follows me, as if a part of that mansion had followed me home, never leaving. Even in broad daylight, as I walked down the busy streets, I could still feel the musty smell of the house, the smell of dust, of forgotten time, still lingering in the air around me. The shadow of that woman, her pale face, her sad eyes, cannot fade from my mind. Every night, her image would return and creep into my dreams, making me wake up in a panic, feeling like someone was still standing next to my bed, looking at me intently. Strange footsteps and inaudible whispers kept repeating in my mind, making it impossible for me to calm down. I began to realize that perhaps I couldn't escape these illusions. No matter how hard I tried to explain them rationally, those strange feelings still persisted, as if something was hovering around me, challenging me to face the inexplicable. One afternoon, while I was walking in the park, I suddenly noticed a faint figure through the tree branches. I turned around, but there was nothing but leaves moving in the wind. However, the cold feeling inside me did not stop, as if that figure was still following me, silently observing from somewhere in the darkness. I wondered if everything I saw was just an overactive imagination, or if there was really something unexplainable behind it. Day after day, I continued to live with that obsession. The feeling of insecurity never completely goes away. Even though I had left that villa, the oppressive air and nameless ghosts still clung to me, as if they had seeped into my every breath and every move. I don't know if I can get out or not. And every night, when I close my eyes, I wait for some presence, something invisible, to remind me that there are things that we cannot understand, but we can still feel them, we can still live with them forever. Still won't let me go. It follows me like a ghost, lurking in the dark corners of my mind. Every time I close my eyes, I see her, a pale figure standing there, cold, motionless, as if part of a picture of the past itself. She is not a vengeful spirit or a spiteful monster, but a silent presence, felt but not understood, like a veil between two worlds. I wondered if she was aware of my presence, if maybe she just wanted me to see her, as a reminder that she never really left. I felt a loneliness in her, a separation from the outside world, as if a part of her had been trapped in that space forever. And part of me, a small part, wondered if she was a reflection of the very fears I carried. So, even though I tried to avoid and run away from those nightmares and memories, a part of me still knew that I wouldn't be able to completely escape. That presence, whether present or not, has become a part of me, a part that cannot be explained and cannot be shaken off. I know that not everything in life can be explained. There are things that still exist beyond our ability to perceive, mysteries that can only be lived with, accepting as part of life, like the shadow that always follows us, whether we like it or not. And even though I live a full and peaceful life, every night when the light gradually fades, I think of her, a silent figure, forever standing by the window, looking out as if waiting for something that I can never fully understand. Pressing closer to me. It felt like the space around me was shrinking, making me feel surrounded. Everything suddenly became quiet, no sound, no noise other than my own breathing. But that silence, oppressive and dense, was as if someone was standing behind me, watching my every move. I turned around, but there was no one. There was no silhouette, just a long, dark hallway, bathed in the faint light from the emergency lights. But the inexplicable feeling, the invisible presence I felt, I couldn't shake. The shadow that I thought was just a vague feeling in my head suddenly became a reality, a presence that I couldn't touch or understand. The light from the emergency lights began to flicker erratically, like someone was controlling it from afar, making me feel a sense of anticipation, as if something was about to happen. I looked around, trying to find a logical reason for this change in space. But nothing. There was only stuffy air, cold walls and darkness covering everything. Once again, I reminded myself that I had to do my job. I have to keep going and not let my imagination get the best of me. But every step I took, every time I looked back, I felt that presence, something staying, waiting. And I know, no matter how hard I try, that presence will never completely leave. Finally, I decided to return to the reception desk, where things seemed more familiar and safer, even though I knew that this feeling wouldn't go away until I could understand more clearly what was happening. But the truth is, I can't explain it, can't erase that feeling, and perhaps, I will never be able to do that. Something strange during the night shifts at the hospital. When I asked questions, their eyes changed. Some people tried to keep quiet, while others just shook their heads slightly and said that nothing was strange, although I could see the confusion and worry flickering in their eyes. A female nurse, who often worked with me on night shifts, couldn't hide her shyness when I asked her. She gently advised me to be careful and not think too much about invisible things. But her voice was uncertain, as if she knew something she couldn't say. My sense of presence in the hospital became a part of me, like a ghost following my every step. Every night, as I continued my work, I clearly felt that I was not alone in those empty hallways. The faint light from the traffic lights and the slight noise of the floorboard seemed to lead me to a place I couldn't escape from. One night, as I was walking through an empty hallway, I heard strange footsteps. Not mine or anyone else's footsteps, but soft footsteps, as if someone was following me from behind. I turned around, but saw nothing but darkness, only the faint glow of emergency lights illuminating the cold walls. My tension increased, but I continued working. Every step I took, every time I passed through the dark corners of the hospital, I felt as if someone was watching me, watching my every move, every breath. That feeling has never left me, as if I am always surrounded by a ghost that I cannot see, but I can clearly feel its presence. There was an overwhelming feeling of coldness when I worked alone on the night shift, and those little noises, those flashes of movement in my peripheral vision, seemed all the more clear in the hospital silence. And sometimes, I wonder if those feelings are just due to extreme fatigue or stress, or if they are actually a sign of something beyond common understanding. In my office, or something has been changed. A fluorescent light flickered as if someone had adjusted it, or maybe the window was strangely ajar even though I was sure I had closed it before leaving. Chairs were folded in a way I didn't remember doing, or even a piece of paper lying haphazardly on the table, a clear sign that there had been an inexplicable intrusion. Every time I return to the office early in the morning, I feel a slight difference in the air, as if a presence is still lurking around. Even though nothing was clear, that feeling still stuck with me. There were times when I thought I heard soft footsteps in the hallway when there was no one else around but me. I usually stand still, listening, but when I went out to check, there was nothing but absolute silence, just empty walls and the light from the dim bulbs. No matter how hard I tried to explain it all as just fatigue or stress, my fear still wouldn't go away. It's an inescapable feeling, as if something is watching me every time I'm in this office. And I realized that whether I left or not, the memories of those evenings, of that strange presence, would never leave me. I feel like I'm in a trap, a place my mind can't explain, and no matter how hard I try to push it out of my mind, it always comes back, like a bruise that won't heal. My fear escalated as I faced strange dreams, dreams in which I felt like I was being watched, shadowy figures standing at the end of the office hallway, soft, inexplicable sounds. That feeling doesn't stop. It haunted my every sleep and made me restless every time I entered that building, wondering if that presence was still waiting for me somewhere in the darkness. Your fear seems to be a very scary and profound experience, making your seemingly ordinary space an unsettling place. That insecurity not only makes you feel physically threatened, but also seeps into your mind, leading to feelings of stress and insomnia. Feelings of surveillance, strange noises, and unexplained phenomena can easily cause a person to become disoriented in the very space he or she thought was safe. Small but terrifying signs, flashing lights, fleeting figures, strange noises in the night, all cause confusion in the mind. And the inability to clearly identify the cause or reason for those experiences adds to the anxiety, like a shadow that never leaves. The more you try to figure it out, the deeper the feeling becomes, as if it's pushing you out of a safe reality into an area you can't control. Ultimately, the question of whether it is a paranormal phenomenon, or just anxiety in the mind, can be an important part of your experience. When you are faced with something inexplicable, sometimes these same questions continue to haunt you and you cannot completely escape. It could be the darkness outside, or a darkness slowly building in your own mind, a combination of fear and imagination. As you've noticed, there are imprints that we carry from a place or an experience, and they can become part of how we later view the world. That feeling may never completely go away, but hopefully you'll find ways to cope and ease those worries, gradually bringing things back to a place where you feel safer. After moving to a new office, I hope to find a sense of peace again, where I could work without worrying about strange noises or fleeting figures. But every night, those feelings resurface. On rainy nights, when the light outside the window is weak and darkness covers everything, I feel like I'm being watched. There were nights when I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, and it felt like someone was standing right next to my bed, right behind me. Unexplainable sounds, like the wind blowing through the windows, or even strange footsteps on the floor, always startle me awake. It seemed that the darkness in this new space did not spare me, but brought with it an uneasy feeling, as if something was still unresolved. One night, while I was sitting at work late, I suddenly heard a light tapping on the office window, a sound so soft that I thought I only heard it in my imagination. But when I looked through the window, there was no one out there. That feeling happened again, just like last time, when I felt like someone was standing in the dark, watching me from afar. Every time I turned around to look, there was nothing, just thick darkness. I started feeling that presence every time I was alone, as if an invisible force was invading the space around me. My dreams became more vivid, with shadowy figures that always brought an uneasy feeling, as if I was never truly alone, and there was always something out there waiting. Although I tried to explain everything as a game of imagination, the truth is, the more I tried to forget, the more intense those feelings became. There were nights when I woke up in a sweat, hearing gasps right next to my bed, even though I knew there was absolutely no one next to me. Was I really dealing with a supernatural phenomenon, or just a product of anxiety and stress? I can't answer that question, but one thing is certain: every time darkness falls, I never feel truly safe, and that presence, although it may be an illusion, always follows me like a wound that never heals. Even though I moved to a new office, the traces of the feeling of insecurity never completely left. Every morning when I wake up, my body is tired and exhausted, but sometimes I hear strange sounds in my head. The sound of soft breathing passed through my ears, as if someone was standing right behind me, waiting for something to happen. I tried to explain it away by reassuring myself that it was just work pressure, but every time that feeling recurred, I felt like a cold wave was flooding my body. One night, as I worked late, the shadows in the office seemed to get thicker and thicker. The light from the fluorescent lights flickered, and even though I turned on the bright lights, I still felt the space become dim and heavy. I couldn't escape the feeling like something was watching me from the darkness, watching my every move. Every time I turned my back, it felt like someone was standing right behind me, not making a sound. I tried to focus on work, but I couldn't. Small sounds like the creaking of doors, the sound of someone breathing right next to me, startled me. I didn't dare turn around, afraid that if I did, would see something I shouldn't have seen. In my head, strange images kept flashing, faint silhouettes that I couldn't explain. One time, as I walked through the hallway in the evening, I felt a cold wind blowing, so light that it was barely noticeable but enough to give me goosebumps. I couldn't explain it, but immediately, a feeling of fear took over me. I stood still, unable to move my legs, only looking into the darkness, where light could not reach. There was something about that space that made me feel suffocated, as if I were trapped between dark walls. Dreams don't help me escape this strange feeling either. Every night, I dream that I'm lost in an endless hallway, with closed doors, and with every step I take, I feel like someone is watching me from behind. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, and the feeling of that presence didn't leave me, as if it were nearby in every room I entered. One night, I couldn't stand it anymore and decided to check the electrical wiring in the office, hoping to find an explanation for the strange phenomena. But as soon as I reached the electrical panel, a slight noise rang out from behind, causing me to turn around immediately. There's no one. But the feeling of being watched still lingered, as if someone was standing right behind me, just a step away. I decided to share with my closest colleague, the person I always trust. I found him in the break room, watching the worried look on his face as I recounted my experiences. He was silent for a long moment, then just said, "It's possible that this building has a long history, and strange things can happen in places like that." I don't know if he really believed what I said, but I felt a little relieved that he didn't laugh at me. The following nights remained unchanged. I'm still working late, I'm still hearing strange noises, and faint shapes are still appearing in my peripheral vision. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something that didn't belong here, something unresolved, still lurking within the old walls of the building. Ultimately, I realized that I would probably never find an official explanation for these phenomena. No matter how I tried to explain it, I couldn't deny that a part of me always felt watched, haunted by that darkness. It was not a concrete presence, but a vague feeling, something invisible but very real. And perhaps, I will always carry it with me in my life, indelibly. With each passing day, my feelings of stress increased. The air in the office began to become thicker, as if an invisible force was pressing down on me. I couldn't say it clearly, but I clearly felt the change in the space around me. Sometimes, when I open the office door in the morning, I feel like something has changed in the room since last night, not an obvious disturbance, but a subtle difference, as if the objects in the room have been moved a little, yet they are still in the same place. It was a strange feeling, and no matter how I tried to explain it, I couldn't get rid of it. Every time I walked through the quiet hallways, especially at night, I heard my own footsteps echoing, but they weren't my steps. Those footsteps sounded as if someone was following me, quiet but clear. My heart started beating faster, my breathing became shallow. I turned around, but there was nothing but shadows at the end of the hallway. Sometimes, I thought I heard a soft whisper, an indistinct voice, as if calling my name. But when I stopped to listen, everything fell silent. I tried searching for an explanation, trying to convince myself that it was due to poor lighting or abnormalities in this old building. But every night, as I sat in my office, the light from the flickering fluorescent lights began to change at an inexplicable pace. Sometimes they light up suddenly, then turn off completely, creating a dark space for a moment, making me panic. But when I stood up to check the switch, the light turned back on normally. Is it a technical problem? I'm not sure. My feeling was that something was controlling those lights, something beyond my control. The later the night, the quieter and more peaceful the space becomes. But it is that silence that is the scariest thing. I don't trust my reason anymore. That shadow always followed me, faint but clear, as if something inside me was aware of that presence. I don't always see it, but every time I stop, breathe deeply, and listen to soothing sounds, I feel its presence. Like an animal stalking its prey, just waiting for me to let my guard down and come closer. There are nights when I can't stop looking back, can't stop feeling that presence. Sometimes, in my peripheral vision, I could see silhouettes passing by the window or fleeting movements in the darkness. I would stand there, waiting, but when I got closer, there was nothing. However, the feeling of something being there never dissipates. I thought I imagined it all, but why do I feel shivers running down my spine every time I look into the dark corners of my office? Every morning, I wake up with fatigue rising in my body, but I continue working as if everything is normal. I couldn't face the truth about those strange things. It's easy to convince yourself that it's all just stress-induced phenomena, old wiring problems. But those things were too real, too obvious for me to ignore. Sometimes, I will pass by a window, and see the silhouette of a person standing in it, even though there is no one in the room. The fact that I couldn't explain everything made me feel even more scared. Am I really the only one seeing these things? Late one night, while I was working alone in the office, suddenly there was a loud noise from outside the door. Made me jump. My lips were dry, my hands were shaking as I opened the door. There's no one outside. There was only a terrifying silence, like everything in this building was holding its breath. But I felt a presence, something watching me from afar, from the darkness. My fear gradually turned into a phobia. I can't separate what's happening in the office from what's going on in my mind. Dreams become increasingly vivid and strange. I dreamed that I was lost in endless corridors, with no way out. And in each of those dreams, I always felt that shadow, still following me, never leaving. Could it be that I have gotten lost in a vicious circle with no way out? I don't know if I can endure this stress any longer. But I can't leave this place. I tried to change my environment, move to a new place, but the memory of that building, of that strange presence, still followed me, like a ghost that couldn't be shaken off. Every night, I feel like there's a door that hasn't closed, and every time I look into the darkness, I hear the whispers of unresolved pasts. One evening, when I was staying late at work, the office's lighting became weak and dimmed, even though I had turned on all the lights. A cold feeling spread in the room, but I couldn't pinpoint its origin. Suddenly, strange sounds began to echo from the end of the hallway. At first there was just a small hissing sound, as if something was rubbing against the wall. Then there was a creaking sound, as if a door was opening, even though I was sure there was no one in the hallway. By the time I got up to check, everything was silent again. My heart pounded loudly in my chest as I turned to look into the darkness outside the door, but there was nothing but long shadows reflected from the opaque windows. However, an indescribable strange feeling lingered in the space. It feels like something is hovering, waiting for a moment of weakness to enter my life, silently but calculatingly. Every day, strange events increase. Once, when I arrived at the office early in the morning, I found papers in disarray that I was sure had put neatly before. More surprisingly, the chairs in the room were moved a bit, and one of the desk drawers I had locked was also open. I rechecked all the locks in the office, making sure no one could get in, but there was no reasonable explanation for the changes. Over the following nights, I began to notice fleeting movements in the corners of my eyes, shadowy shadows, as if someone was moving back and forth in the darkness. But when I turned around, there was nothing. Sometimes, when I pass by the walls, I feel like the paintings in the room are watching me. The eyes of the characters in the painting seem to change positions, small smiles appear on their faces. Every time I look at those paintings, a cold feeling rises in my heart, and I feel a strange insecurity intertwining reality and an invisible world. One night, after all the staff had left, I heard a loud noise, like a door being slammed, coming from the end of the hallway. Feeling tension rising inside me, I decided to go get checked, even though I didn't want to. When I walked out of the office, the hallway was dark, and I felt an invisible presence weighing heavily in the space. I walked down the hallway, and as I approached the last door, I felt a blast of cold air on my face, but when I opened the door, there was no one there. There was only empty space, quiet, and a strange feeling like something was hiding behind the wall. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I feel like I'm being watched, like there's a pair of eyes silently following my every move. In my mind, one question kept echoing: am I really going through this? Or is it all just a product of a tired imagination and stress? But this inescapable feeling kept following me, making it impossible for me to get rid of it. Sometimes, I feel like everything around me is falling apart, like I'm falling into a bottomless pit that I can't get out of. One morning, when I returned to the office after a sleepless night, I saw a strange item in my room. It was an antique clock that I definitely hadn't kept there before. This watch has an ancient, dusty look, as if it had been there for decades. I don't remember who put it there, and its appearance makes me feel creepy. I tried checking the time, but the clock hands weren't moving, although I could hear slight sounds coming from it, as if something in the clock was behaving strangely. These events began to last longer and increase in frequency. I no longer feel safe in this space. The feeling of a supernatural presence, an invisible spirit or entity living within the walls of the building, watching my every move, became stronger and stronger. I know I can't continue living in this panic, but I can't simply walk away. The building, with all the traces of its past, had taken root in my mind, and part of me felt like I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried. Over the following nights, I began recording what happened in the office, trying to find evidence of what I was experiencing. But every time I look back, I can't explain what happened. Maybe it's all just a product of a tired mind in this mysterious place, but there's a part of me that can't accept that explanation. And then, one night, when I finally dared to face the darkness in my office, I realized that there was something more than imagination. I was deceived by what I saw, by the light, by the shadows in space. But in the end, something touched my soul, making me realize that this building was more than just a physical structure. It contained souls, memories, and events that I could not explain. I still don't know exactly what I encountered, but I know that there are things that exist beyond what the naked eye can see, and I will never be able to forget that shadow, always lurking in the darkness, just waiting for a moment of weakness to enter my life. In the following days, I couldn't stop. Every time I enter the office, I feel like I'm entering a strange place where things are no longer the same. This space, where I used to work every day, is now filled with strange signs, invisible movements, and unexplained sounds. I started avoiding looking at mirrors in the office. Because every time I do that, I feel like my eyes are no longer my own. The reflections in the mirror never seemed to quite match what I perceived, and I always felt that there was something behind the glass, something mysteriously looking back at me. One evening, as I was sitting at my desk, cold sweat pouring down the back of my neck, I heard a strange noise from behind me, like heavy breathing. I turned around quickly, but there was no one. Everything was as quiet as ever, except for an invisible breath hanging in the air. At that moment, I realized that I was no longer alone. There was something present, a shadow in space, a trapped soul. And then, that night, as I was about to finish my work day, I saw the strangest thing of my life. In the mirror, outside my window, I saw a dark figure standing there, almost blending into the darkness. My eyes blurred and I couldn't believe what I saw. I can't distinguish between reality and ambiguity anymore. I wonder if I'm being haunted, or if there's really some force residing in this space. Finally, I decided that I had to face it. I walked out into the hallway, where I felt a change in the air. The space around me became stuffy, every step felt like I was caught in an invisible force. I walked closer to the main door of the building, my hands trembling tightly holding the doorknob. When the door opened, I turned one last time to look at my office. And then, in that moment, I heard a very close breathing sound, as if someone was standing right behind me. I turned around, but there was nothing but darkness. I walked out, telling myself that this was the last time I would leave. I left the office and never came back. That building, without any explanation, left a mental wound in me, a haunting that I cannot erase. From that day on, I no longer thought about work there. I have moved to a new place, a different space. But on long nights, when I'm alone in my bedroom, I still feel like something isn't over. The shadow still lurks inside me, sometimes appearing in dreams, sometimes just a glimpse at the end of the road. I don't know if I can escape this haunting, but I know that the doors of that building, and the souls that remain, will forever be a part of my life. And even though I left, the feeling of being watched, of suffocation in those dark hallways, still stuck with me like a never-ending nightmare. The building, not a place containing inanimate objects, is a place that holds indelible traces, a story that is never completely finished. Even though I left the building, even though I moved to a new place with clean walls and fresh air, the shadows from the past still followed me. Those nights when I wake up in a cold sweat, I realize that not every story has a clear ending. There are memories, obsessions, shadows that we cannot banish, whether they exist in the mind or space. There are places, spirits, events imprinted in space, and no matter how much we try to escape or explain, they are still hidden somewhere, waiting, observing and sometimes whispering in dreams. Unanswered questions still surround me, reminding me that there is something we cannot fully understand, a different world but always present right next to us, waiting for every moment of weakness to reveal itself. Maybe, sometimes, it's not that we can't escape those shadows, it's that we just learn to live with them. The shadows never disappear, they just lurk in space, sometimes just a fleeting shadow in the corner of our eyes, but we know that they are always there, forever.